Ukraine's progress on implementing its reforms is a topic of heated debate among international partners and allies. In February, at the Munich Security Conference, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg hinted that Ukraine's bid to one day join the military alliance, among a number of factors, will also depend on its progress on implementing reforms. So let's talk about Ukraine's development in 2017 and its plans for 2018. Joining us to discuss this is Francis Malige, the Managing Director of European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
So tell us about some of your impressions over the past 4 years. You've been here in Kiev, and you've seen which areas that Ukraine lags behind and which Ukraine has been successful in terms of reform. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
There's been a lot of very positive things happening over the past 3-4 years, including things I just said where everyone thought they were impossible to achieve, like tackling Naftogaz, like the nationalization of a private bank, like even the reform of the state procurement system. And all of this has been achieved. None of this is perfect, but all of this has been achieved. And so I think there's been a lot of positive movement in the past few years on reforms of Ukraine. I think the one area where progress has not been as big as in others is in the fight against corruption, by which I mean the creation of the institutions to fight corruption.
I think the anti-corruption court.
Exactly, because I think there's actually been a lot of success in removing opportunities for corruption. When you remove the intermediaries between Gazprom and Naftogaz, when you align the price of gas to the world market prices, I know it's difficult socially and there needs to be subsidies for the people that cannot afford to pay the new price. But at the same time, you remove a lot of opportunities for corruption. So this kind of turning off the tap exercise has been quite successful. What has not been is the anti-corruption court and generally the reform of the rule of law institutions like the Prosecutor General and others.
So you just mentioned that one of the key things was finding balance between Ukraine completely cutting off Russian gas and new prices in the country, and some people obviously can't afford it. And at the same time, you said that there's been a lot of success. But what's kind of been featured in the Ukrainian media is that it's largely believed that a lot of the universities have stopped lectures and have stopped seminars as a result of these massive buildings unable to find a way to pay the heating bill. And students have their education has been postponed until spring, for example. Now, what do you recommend to kind of avoid situations like these, where the country's top institutions have to look for other ways, change the whole schedule around in order to fit the programs?
Well, obviously, when you have a situation like this, just let me say something first. When you have low prices of gas for everyone, you are in fact subsidizing the richer people more, because they have larger apartments, they drive larger cars, they use more energy in general than other people, right? And so if you give a low price to everyone, in fact, you're subsidizing the richer people more. What needs to be done is, if you increase the prices, you need to figure out who are the people that can afford, and these people should pay the higher price, and who are the people and the institutions that cannot afford. And for these institutions, a subsidy system, and for these people, a subsidy system should be put in place that works. And hopefully this subsidy system works for the population. If it doesn't work for institutions, then it means there's a conversation that needs to be had between the finance ministry, the education ministry, the university itself, so that some compensation can be paid to them, or they can receive an additional budget for it. But let's not forget that the price subsidy is very inefficient. It's much more efficient to subsidize
not for everyone.
Exactly.
Right. So not for everyone, but specifically targeting organizations, institutions, and people who cannot afford it, whose pensions, for example, pensioners, and then you have people with low income, families.
Absolutely.
I see. So, I mean, currently the EBRD have 12 billion in cumulative investment, and 4 billion in portfolio projects. Yeah. So how do those numbers compare to the other countries that you guys are also, that the EBRD is also sponsoring and providing financial investments, such as Azerbaijan, Moldova, Belarus? How do you find where to distribute the money?
Ukraine is much larger, but it's not like we decide at the beginning of the year we want to distribute money to Ukraine or to Azerbaijan or to. We are a bank that works with projects. So as long as there's good projects, there will be money for these good projects. We are not at a time when we say we have too much exposure, it's too risky to lend more to Ukraine. We have plenty of space to lend more to Ukraine. Our real constraint is to find good clients and good projects for us to lend to.
Right. So for example, you have Moldova, and you have Belarus, which are obviously also, their economies aren't in a good position. But do you make some kind of assessments of which economy is in more need for investments, and so can you kind of tell us how much thinking goes into, and what kind of process goes into picking these countries and deciding which one kind of gets more money?
As I said, first of all, the countries of EBRD are assigned to us by our shareholders. There's 67 shareholders of the bank, countries. Ukraine is a shareholder, the US is a shareholder, so countries from all over the world, frankly. We just welcomed China as a new shareholder, Lebanon as well. So this region of operations has been decided a long time ago by our shareholder countries. Now, in each country, we have a process where we determine what priorities are needed to support the evolution of and the construction of a well-functioning market economy. These priorities are very different in Moldova, in Belarus, and in Ukraine. You have very different situations, and therefore we adapt to these situations. But it is not the case that I need to say at the beginning of the year I'm going to give more money to Ukraine, therefore I need to give less to another country, or vice versa. As I said, we look for projects. We have about 100 people working for EBRD in this country. A big group is in Kiev. We also have offices in Odessa, Kharkiv, and Lviv. We look for clients, we look for projects.
Right. So you just mentioned about the priorities. You look at kind of key priorities, so what about Ukraine? What are the 3 key priorities?
3 key priorities in Ukraine. We've been working a lot with the banking sector reform. The banking is like the lifeblood of an economy. If you don't have blood working through your veins, the body doesn't work very well.
Right.
So the banks play that role in an economy. It's really important that banks lend, especially to small and medium enterprises, and that's what we're encouraging them to do. It has been very difficult in the past few years. Energy sector has been a very big priority for reasons of energy security and also for reasons of energy efficiency. Ukraine uses 3 times as much energy to produce the same amount of wealth every year. Per unit of GDP, it uses 3 times as much energy as the EU average. So something must be done about the energy efficiency, about the district heating, about the renewable energy, and so on and so forth in Ukraine. That's a very large priority. And then we've invested, of course, you know our work with Naftogaz, where we've invested also in transforming the corporate governance so that this would be a well-managed company, which it wasn't a few years ago. And then the last priority, I would say, is to support the private sector development. Agribusiness is very big for EBRD. Agribusiness is very big for Ukraine. So it's an area where we do a lot. The corporate sector. And then finally, if I can have a 4th priority, we do invest a lot in infrastructure. We have a program for roads maintenance that is innovative in this country, meaning that we actually pay the contractors. I mean, Kraftodor pays the contractors, not on the basis of how many tons of concrete they pour onto the road, but on how many potholes there are, and how deep they are, and what's the quality of the road overall. And if there's more holes, then they get less money. So that provides an incentive for the contractors to maintain the road well. And it's working. If you go on that stretch of road, it makes a difference.
What's the biggest kind of chunk of areas of infrastructure that the EBRD has been involved in and has seen successful results?
I think that I would say this in recent years, this roads program has been successful, but infrastructure is also rail infrastructure. And we've just signed, you might have seen late last year in December, a large project. On the 30th of December, it was the last project that EBRD signed last year with the Ministry of Infrastructure, a project for Ukrzalyznica to electrify and to double the tracks in one part of the network, a critical part of the network, where a lot of the traffic goes towards the south, towards Mykolaiv and Odessa. We have another project underway to buy rolling stock for UZ. The wagons are sometimes old and need to be replaced. So
some of them have been revamped, obviously.
There you go. But there's much more need than this. And then, of course, the infrastructure is also ports, airports, and so on. And we've been working with the government for now a number of months about a new concession law. Once you have a concession, that means that you can bring in private sector money to run things like a port, like an airport, and so on. And that's important because Ukraine does not have infinite fiscal space to spend on infrastructure, all of the infrastructure that it would want or that is needed.
Right. Well, another huge airport that Ukraine had was in Donetsk. As you know, it's been now completely destroyed, as with other parts of the eastern region. Does the EBRD, do you have future plans in how you want to help rebuild the infrastructure when the territories that are currently under Russian-backed occupation to help restore?
Well, you know, when these territories are restored to the sovereignty of the country, of course we'll be there. Next week I'm actually going to Mariupol to talk to the city. Now I know that's not under occupation.
Well, yeah, you can't really compare.
No, but it's very close. And we're still interested in working with Mariupol to develop the infrastructure there. And when Donetsk returns to the sovereignty of Ukraine, we'll be the first to go and to look at airports, district heating, all of the infrastructure that's needed. Well, you know, it would obviously be a team effort. The first one to go and assess the need for reconstruction, I think this is an exercise that's actually ongoing, is the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, that actually has a fairly good idea of how much is needed there. And then, you know, depending on the needs, some of them can be financed by the World Bank, some of them can be financed by the European Investment Bank. We tend to focus on investments that have a private sector angle, so either entrepreneurs or concessions, these sorts of things. So it's not going to be an EBRD alone effort. It will have to be a team effort with you know, friends of Ukraine, Ukraine itself also, because it's one of the national priorities once the time will be right to rebuild.
Well, thank you very much. It sounds like you have a lot of plans, and we're looking forward to seeing more of the EBRD do its great work here in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Thank you.